Yeah, so what I was discussing, I think the difference between the attrition and shear, right? So my question is like instead of this group of particle which you can see here, okay, can you see my screen or
No, sir.
now?
Yes,
Yes.
sir.
Okay, everything was gone. So okay, so if I take this to be a case, and instead of let's having all these particles, if we have only one particle, right? Only one particle, and this top and bottom plate are moving in different direction. So what you can say, the force that is acting on that particle, will that be shear force or attrition?
Shear force.
Yeah, then what is the difference? Where is the fallacy? You are right. So if we say that that is a shear force, and instead of all one particle, if you have bunch of particles, then we are saying that it's an attrition. So the thing is, like, you have a force, but you have a discontinuity in the force, right? When you have multiple contact points here. So if that is the case, in that kind of scenario, the shear force is basically attributed or named as attrition. It's basically the same thing, but the continuum is not present here. It's a discontinuity. So that's why we always use the term attrition in case of powders or in case of solids. Not in case of single solid or single material of powder. When you have bunch of materials which is not continuous, but you are applying a shear force on the top of it or on the bottom of it. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So with that, last class we had discussed all this mechanism and everything, and then we finally ended up saying that there are laws which correlates the energy requirement for crushing or grinding, and the general correlation is if you have a particle of characteristic length of L and you wanted to create a new length of delta L on that L, so you are basically breaking the particle. So that can be correlated using a power law, and the general law says that the energy requirement is directly proportional to inversely proportional to L to the power n. Now if you take away the proportionality, you will get a constant, and which is known as the crushing or grinding constant. So based on this specific ideology, we will discuss few laws today. The first one is the Rittinger's law. See, the Rittinger's law was described or initially put forward by Rittinger in 1867. That's a long time back. So you can understand or you can appreciate the efficiency of this type of laws. This type of laws may not be that efficient because it was invented long time back, and we don't have much knowledge of many of the things that we have right now. But still, this kind of laws are giving you or will give you a basic idea of the energy requirement. It will not be that efficient, but it will give you a very basic idea. And these are very simple laws. Okay, what this law says, the law says that the work done in crushing is proportional to the surface exposed by the operation. So obviously in crushing or grinding, whatever be the operation, you have, let's take as an example of single particles. You have a single particle, you break it into two particles. So what you will do in this process, you will generate new areas, right? The point at which the particle will break, if you take away these that point, 2 points, you will have two multiple areas exposed. So that two area basically you are creating by this process. So what Rittinger is saying that this area that is being created due to the breakage of particle is directly correlated to the work requirement for the crushing. Now by area, what we wanted to mean here, by area what we wanted to mean here is nothing but the specific surface area. So if we make this statement into a mathematical form, we can write that W is directly proportional to the difference between the surface area of the product and difference between and the feed. So this is the representation of surface area. This is nothing but the specific surface area. When you see the small term, it's specific. So specific surface area of the product minus specific surface area of the feed, that is the specific surface area which is being generated by this crushing or grinding process. And that is directly proportional to the work requirement. And the proportionality constant here is known as Rittinger's constant. Now, if we replace this specific surface area in terms of rho and in terms of specific surface in terms of diameter, specific volume surface diameter of the particle, we can say that this SP is basically nothing but 6 by rho s dvs. If you go back and see the particle characterization lecture, you will see this this derivation is already there. How we can correlate the specific surface area with the volume surface mean diameter. Now, if you replace this, you will get this equation. If I club all these three terms, I can get a constant which is known as the modified Rittinger's constant, whereas Kr, normally Kr is known as Rittinger's constant, and 1 by Kr is something which is designated as Rittinger's number. So this Rittinger's number is something which we find out using an experiment, and that experiment is also there in our lab. That is known as drop test method. So if anyone is interested, you can Google it and check it how you do it. Basically, you drop a particle from a specific height and you increase the height. And by that way, you can calculate the energy that is the particle is being storing, and then you calculate how much surface area it creates due to the breakage, and find out the Rittinger's constant and the Rittinger's number. Now, a question. What do you think if I take two different particles, same size but made of different material, right? And one experiment, I have two particles, same size but made of different materials. Second experiment, same particle but is of different size, right? Now, if I wanted to find out this Rittinger's number or Rittinger's constant, which one will have different Rittinger's constant and which one will have same Rittinger's constant? Let me remodify the question and make it more simple. So do you think that if I change the particle, the Rittinger's constant will change, the material of the particle?
Yes, sir.
Now, do you think that for same material, the Rittinger's constant will be always same? Okay. Before going into that complicated discussion, let us prove this Rittinger's law first. So what Rittinger says that the work done in crushing is proportional to the surface area exposed by this operation. Let's take this operation. This is the particle, this square is the particle, and these two are the surface which is moving in opposite direction. And if you place the particle something like this, and the particle has a volume of V, and if you move these two surfaces opposite to each other, what would happen? The particle will break from this length. It can break from different directions also, but let's take it that the particle will break from this line, right? Do the same experiment, just change the volume of the particle and make it V by 8. Take a particle which has a volume of 1/10 of this, the volume of this particle. Again, you do the same thing. The area, the length of this plane is taken as xx dash. In this plane, the particle will break. This is the line of deformation. In both the cases, you will observe that you have to move these two discs or these two surfaces to a distance d before you can break the particle. Now, if we do that, what would happen after the breakage? This particle will be divided into two particles, and let's take the area which is being created because of the breaking of particle is A. right? The volume of this entire cube is V, and if the volume of the entire cube is V by 8, obviously the area that will be generated due to the breakage would be A by 4. This is simple geometry you can calculate, right? Now for cube 1, the area of one section is A. For cube 2, the area of one section is A by 4. Let average distance to shear per square inch is F. So let's the force or the shear force that you are applying in both the cases are same. The distance traveled by both the planes to rupture the particle is d in both the cases. That is what I said. So the energy required here is F multiplied. F is what? The shear force per square inch, that multiplied by the area multiplied by the distance. And in the cube 2 it would be same. But here the area that is exposed is equal to A by 4. Here the surface produced is 2A, because see, you will be creating two surfaces A and A here. Similarly for the cube 2 you will create two particles, one is A by 4 and one is A by 4 here. So surface, this is the energy which you are supplying in the first particle and the second particle, and this is the surface area which is produced in the first cube, and this is the surface area which will be produced in the second cube. That would be 2 into A by 4. Now what we can conclude from these two? Now if we try to say that energy required is directly proportional to the new surface area created, can we say that?
Yes, sir.
Fine. So this is what Rittinger wants to say. But things we have assumed silently lot of things which may not be true always. This d distance may not be same always, but we have silently assumed all these things. So this is, but in most of the cases, if you assume this thing to be correct, you will get a theoretical estimation of the energy which is somehow closely what you will get from the experiment. That matches closely of whatever you will get from the experiment. So that is why this law is most popular. And this law you will see when the particle size is very small, this law somehow gives you better result compared to when your particle size is big. I'll compare different laws later on. Okay, now let's go back to the Rittinger's number. So these are the Rittinger's number for different particles.
Sir, I had a doubt in the previous formula. There, the next previous slides. Before the formula part. Yes, sir. Here.
Yeah.
Here, sir. Specific ratio is it 1, sir, for the particle here?
Yeah, specific surface ratio, yes.
Yes, sir. Is it 1?
Yeah. You remember the correlation?
Yes, sir. 6 specific surface area equal to 6n by rho into d average.
Yes. And if your n is equal to 1, then and then only you will get this formula, right?
Yes. So why we have to treat it as 1?
What is SP? Let's go back to the definition of SP. This is SP. This is
Yes.
what you got SP. SP is
Yes.
equal to what? 6 by dV
Rho s into 5s.
rho s into 5s, right? So you substitute here the same thing.
Okay, sir.
So you will get one 5s. That is your confusion, right?
Yes.
Where the 5s is gone.
Yes.
Yeah, but the 5s will everything will go into your Rittinger's constant. Modified Rittinger's constant.
Okay, sir.
This is for a simple case, like for a sphere we derive all these things, but if it is not sphere, obviously a phi will come here for a general case. And you can club everything into modified Rittinger's constant.
Sir, here dvs is dv radius or d average?
No, here dV is volume surface mean diameter.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Clear.
Now the question that I had, previously. Okay, let me. Yeah. So can you hear me? Connection is there or it's gone?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
you
Yes,
are
sir.
audible.
Good. So now the question. So you can see that the Retinger number are different for different materials, right? Makes sense? That is what you said. Fine. Let's take the example of calcium carbonate. So I've given you one example of chalk. You remember, chalk is made of what? Calcium carbonate.
Yes, sir.
And have you seen the marble? What is the chemical composition of marble?
That is also CaCO3.
Yeah, calcium carbonate. Then what is the fallacy? Not
So
fallacy.
the,
Like
so the
if you-
marble is more hardened,
yes,
but
yes.
the chalk is not so much hard.
Chalk is not so much hard, but if I try to find out the Retinger number for chalk and for marble, will I get the same number? The
No, sir.
Retinger number is kind of representation of how much energy you need to break the particle. Some sort of that information. Obviously, to break a marble, we need more energy. It's very common, quite obvious. So if we say that the Retinger number is constant for a constant material, that statement is not right actually. You have to take into account of the morphology of the surface also. So marble is what? It's a metamorphic rock composed of recrystalline carbonate minerals, most commonly known as calcite or dolomite. That is what is used to make this marble. But its chalk is soft, white, porous, sedimentary carbon rock. A form of limestone composed of mineral calcite. So although the chemical composition is same, but the physical structure of the particle is different. So when we say that the Retinger number is constant for a specific material, we have to take into account both the consideration. One, its chemical composition as well as its physical morphology, like how the particles are, how the molecules are oriented, and what is the crystalline, what is the crystal look like. So both physical and geometrical consideration you have to take into account while defining the Retinger number. So if both are same, then only your Retinger number will come at same. Only the chemical composition will not make it same. So with that, the Retinger law is over. So now come the next law, which is known as Kick's law. It was proposed by Kicks at 1885, somewhat newer compared to Retinger law. So what this law says? This law says that the original form of the law says that this law has different type of definition. So the initial statement of the law was energy required to produce analogous changes of configuration of geometrically similar bodies varies as the volume of or masses of these bodies. Let's not go into this complicated definition. Let's look into the modified definition of Kick's, which is mostly known and which is universally accepted. So the modified Kick's law says the work required for crushing a given mass of material is constant for the same reduction ratio irrespective of its original size. So this law says that whatever be your initial size doesn't matter. The work required for crushing will be same if the reduction ratio is same. So that is what it's saying. And if you make this statement into a mathematical form, this mathematical form I will not prove. This is a homework. You take it as a homework. You try to get the mathematical form from this statement. How we can achieve this mathematical expression. So if we convert this, let's assume that if we convert this statement into a mathematical form, we will get the work required for crushing is equal to a constant multiplied by logarithm of ratio of your average diameter of your feed and average diameter of product. Average diameter means it's a volume surface mean diameter. Volume surface mean diameter of feed divided by the volume surface mean diameter of product with a constant in front of it. That is known as Kick's constant. So what is the basic difference between these two laws?
Sir, here the reduction ratio is specified, but there it is not specified.
There it was not specified, and the previous law was completely different. It says that the energy required is directly proportional to the new surface created. Here we don't, there is nothing discussed regarding the new surface created, right? So these two are completely different statements. But both of them says that this is the one way of calculating work done and this is one way of calculating work done. And you see that which one is actually getting you good result compared to the experimental observation. We will see that which law is valid in which regime. The third one is Bond's law. This is the most popular and most widely used. It states the initial law statement was again very complicated. So let me just read the law statement once. It states that the total work useful in breakage that has been applied to a given weight of homogeneous broken material is inversely proportional to the square root of the average size of product particles, directly proportional to the length of crack tips formed, and directly proportional to the square root of the new surface created. So he takes into account all the consideration. See, the formation of crack, the formation of new surface created, a homogeneous weight of particle, everything he has taken into consideration. And when taking into consideration all these things, this law is again can be restated into a more general form, which can be directly converted into a mathematical form, which says that the work required this is the work required to form particle of size dp from a very large feed is proportional to the square root of the surface to volume ratio of the product. So this law says that if you have a very large particle and if you wanted to break it to and bring it to a particle which is having a size of dp, here this dp is average particle size. This is not volume surface mean diameter. So be careful while solving the problem. So in Bond's law you have average particle size, but in Kick's and Rittinger's law you have volume surface mean diameter. And this law says that if you wanted to bring a particle to a size of dp from a very large particle size, very big particle size, then the work required is directly proportional to the inverse of the square root of the size dp. So let's try to understand this one and how we can get this formula out of that. So as for this law, what we can say that, let's statement of this law once again. The second statement, the work required to form particle of size dp from a very large feed, right, is proportional to the square root of the surface to volume ratio of the product. So what it says that if I leave this part, yeah, if I leave this part apart, now this law makes sense. This is the work required and this is inversely proportional to the 1 by square root of the product particle size dp with a proportionality constant kb. Right. So if I directly convert this statement to a mathematical form, can I write this one except this minus part? The work required to form particle size of dp from a very large feed is proportional to the square root of the surface to volume ratio of the product. See, nothing. If you make df as infinite, obviously this term will be 0. from a very large feed. So if your feed is very large, obviously this will be the mathematical form of the statement. Now when you are breaking the particle from a finite size of feed to a finite size of product, then you can write the entire mathematical expression which is written here. Right, so there is something called work index, which is mostly used to find out this bonds constant. So this bonds constant is something which is not universally accepted terms or known for specific process or for specific particles. So instead of bonds constant, what we write is something called work index. Right, now how this work index is defined, it's nothing but it's defining the against the bond constant in a different way by putting some constraints. So work index is defined as the gross energy requirement in kilowatt hours per ton of feed needed to reduce a very large feed to a size such that 80% of the product passes 100 micron screen. So just focus on the red marks. These are something which are key points you need to remember while remembering the work index. So work index is defined as the gross energy requirement in kilowatt hour. In kilowatt hour, you have to mention it in kilowatt hour per ton of feed that is needed to reduce a very large feed to such a size that 80% of the product passes through 100 micron screen. So here one thing you have to appreciate that we are fixing the product size here. See, the product size we have already fixed. So the product size has to be something which has to pass through 100 micron screen, and 80% of the product has to pass through the 100 micron screen. That is the constraint. And if you start with a very large particle and landed up to a point where your product is such that 80% of the product is passing through 100 micron screen, then the energy requirement would be equal to work index. So let's put it in mathematical form. Let's start with the basic equation that we have seen in last slide. And now what is the definition here? We start with a very large feed. So let's make this 1 by df to be equal to 0 because df is equal to infinity here. We start with a very large feed. And what it is saying that the energy required in that case would be equal to work index of the particle. So W would be equal to Wi when your df is tending to d infinity. And dp is such that dp has to be equal to 100 microns, where 80% of the product has to pass through 100 micron screen. So it's a combination such that your product, you have a product, and if you take this product and you pass it through 100 micron screen, 80% should go into underflow. This is the constraint. If that is the case and you started with a very large particle, then the work requirement would be equal to Wi. So again, if you go back and put it in the main equation, so W is equal to Wi when d tending to infinity, and dp is equal to what? 100 micron. So we put directly dp as 100 micron. Remember, this is a constraint, like 80% of the product has to pass through. So in that case, Wi will come. So we try to find out the relation between Wi and Kb. So Wi would be equal to Kb multiplied by 1 by root over of 100. So Kb is equal to 10 Wi when dp is in micron. So when dp is expressed in millimeters, it's nothing 10 into 10, 100 into 10 to the power minus 3. And if you calculate that, it will come that Kb is equal to 0.316 Wi. So this is the relation between Kb and Wi when dp is in millimeter, and this is the relation when dp is in micron. Why I am doing this, you will understand when you will see the problems. So that is what is written. E energy requirement is in kilowatt and m dot is in tons per hour. That is the definition, and the relation is that Kb would be equal to 10 Wi and Kb would be equal to 0.3162 Wi when it is expressed in millimeter. So why we are defining such a unnecessary index, work index, and then proceed with then try to correlate. What is the reason? Can anyone guess like why we are doing this? What is the point of making taking additional constraint and try to correlate with the constant? Any idea like why we are doing it why we are doing such kind of correlations? Any guess? Okay, you think on it. You can answer it in the next class. I'll share all these slides and everything. So what we are doing in the next step, we are replacing this bond constant with the work index. So instead of bond constant, now we have the work requirement in terms of work index as well as the product and feed particle size. So if you know the feed particle size, the average feed particle size, average product particle size, and if you know the work index of the system, then you are in a position to estimate the work required to break the particle from dF to dP using the Bond's law. Now, when we will use Bond law, when Kick's law, when Rittinger's law, that I will discuss in the next class, right? Because we don't have time left. And one last question: this Wi. Do you think that Wi is something which would be constant for a specific particle or for a mixture of particle, or will it also depend on the process also? Suppose I'm trying to break the particle from dF to dP using a machine called A, any machine, and I am trying to do the same thing using a machine B, and both the particles in both the cases particles are same. It's the same mixture. Now for process A, if I try to check the Wi, and for process B, if I try to check Wi, will it be same or not same? Will it be equal or not equal?
Not.
Why not equal? Because both the materials are same.
Because like the process A may have different efficiency while the process B.
But in both the process, I am only breaking. I'm considering the energy which is required to break the particle only, nothing else.
But
So then it would be same, I think.
Product passes from 100 micrometers.
Yeah, that is a constraint. That is a constraint which is there in the definition itself. And but energy required to run the machine and all these things, eliminate all this stuff. Only energy required to break the particle. You have a big particle, you wanted to break it. And in both the cases, the particles are same, but the strategies or the machine that you are using is different.
Sir, it would still be different because it could be that along some angle it would take more energy to break the particle, and along some other angle it would be
Right. Absolutely right. The clue here is, see this, the first slide here. Depends on the system that we are using, whether we are having impact force, whether we are having attrition, shear, compression. We don't know because we are using different processes, and different processes will have different type of force applied to it, which is used to break the particle. And some particle may break easily with impact force, some may break with less amount of attrition force, and some is more favorable using shear, some is favorable using compression. So we don't know. But what is the work index says that a work index is something which is a measure of the energy requirement, right? See the definition, it's a measure of the energy requirement. So this cannot be same in both the cases. It also depends on the process which is involved. Although we are only taking into consideration the work required to break the particle, nothing else. But still, Right? Do you agree with me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So let us finish this class with a good agreement. And if you have any question, you can stay.